Welcome to the deep dive. You know, it feels like artificial intelligence is, well, it's everywhere these days.
Absolutely everywhere.
And education is right in the thick of it, isn't it? We hear this constant buzz about how AI is going to transform learning.
Mm-hmm.
And often using this really powerful word, democratize.
That word, yeah, democratize, it gets thrown around a lot. It always conjures up these ideas of, access, equality, opening doors for everyone.
Right.
But when we talk about AI in education, what does that actually mean? Maybe more to the point, does the AI we're seeing rolled out now, the commercial stuff, does it really live up to that promise?
That's exactly the question driving this deep dive.
Mm.
We've been spending time with a really thought-provoking research article.
Which one is this?
It's called Why AI Will Not Democratize Education, a critical pragmatist perspective, published in Philosophy and Technology.
Okay. And what's fascinating, I think, about this paper is how it tackles that question. It doesn't just look at the tech specs.
Oh, not at all.
It uses the philosophy of John Dewey, his ideas on democratic education, which are quite rich.
Dense, even.
Dense, yeah, to build a framework.
Yeah.
And then it asks, okay, does current educational AI actually measure up to that standard?
And this is where the paper gets really interesting, maybe even a bit surprising.
How so?
Well, its central argument really pushes back against that simple narrative we hear. It suggests that AI, particularly in its, let's say, dominant forms like intelligent tutoring systems, might actually undermine key parts of democratic education, at least how Dewey saw it.
Yeah.
Instead of democratizing it.
Wow. So it challenges that common idea that just increasing access is enough to call it democratization?
Exactly.
The paper argues, using Dewey, that democratic education is actually much, much broader than just access.
Okay, so let's unpack this. Our mission here, for you listening, is to really understand Dewey's vision as this paper interprets it.
Mm-hmm.
Then look closely at the characteristics of current educational AI that the paper identifies.
And see where they clash.
Right, where they clash.
Yeah.
The goal is to move past the buzzwords and get to a more, nuanced understanding of technology and learning.
Sounds good. So where should we start? Dewey's vision.
Let's do it. What did Dewey mean by democratic education, according to the paper?
Okay, so the paper lays out that Dewey had what's often called a fit conception of democracy. For him, it wasn't just about, say, voting or government structures.
More than just civics class.
Way more. He famously saw democracy as a mode of associated living, of conjoint communicated experience.
Associated living. That phrasing, it feels much more active, doesn't it?
It really does.
Less about just receiving rights and more about, actively doing things together.
Precisely. For Dewey, it was fundamentally about cooperation, working towards shared goals, widespread participation, talking things through deliberation, and constant open communication within a community.
Okay.
And because of that, education is absolutely central. Schools aren't just places to dump knowledge into kids' heads. They are, or they should be, places where young people learn how to live democratically, like laboratories for democracy itself.
So it's not just learning about democracy, like memorizing facts about the Constitution.
Oh, much more than that. Which leads the paper to identify 4 key features of democratic education based on Dewey. They're all interconnected.
Okay, what's the first one?
First, education has to prepare students for democratic living. That means giving them the knowledge, the skills, and importantly, the dispositions, the habits of mind and heart they need to be active, contributing, critical members of a democratic society.
Got it. Building those foundational capabilities for being a citizen. What's number 2?
Second, democratic education must incorporate democratic practices and values right there within the school. Schools need to walk the walk, not just talk the talk.
Right.
They need to be environments where communication and cooperation are actually practiced, where students get experience in how democratic living feels and works. Deliberating together, engaging with different viewpoints, learning how to handle disagreements constructively.
So the process of learning is just as crucial as the content. Learning needs to be social, experiential, participatory.
Exactly.
Not just passively soaking things up. I remember the paper mentioning Dewey's critique of, just teachers lecturing at students.
Absolutely. Students need chances to deliberate with peers, to see others, even people they disagree with, as potential sources of insight or partners in solving problems together.
Right.
It's not always comfortable, maybe not the most efficient way to cover material.
Definitely not always efficient.
But it's essential training for democracy. The paper uses a great example from Dewey's own work.
Oh, yeah.
Teaching history, not just by reading a textbook, but by having students actually engage with something like, say, textile production, hands-on.
Okay. Okay.
By understanding the effort, the complexity, they get this profound, felt understanding of something like the Industrial Revolution's impact. It connects abstract knowledge to lived experience and social change.
That makes so much sense. Learning by doing and doing it together, grappling with the real world.
Yeah.
Okay, what's the third aspect?
Third, democratic education should be democratically governed.
Governed. How so?
Meaning the students themselves, the teachers, parents, the wider community, they should all have meaningful opportunities to participate in decisions about what education is for, how schools are run, what counts as valuable learning.
So, having a say in their own education.
Yes, having a shared influence over their educational environment. That's seen as a critical part of preparing them for democratic participation later on.
So it's not just about what happens inside the classroom, but about who decides what the classroom looks like, the curriculum, how the school operates.
Exactly. From decisions within a single school right up to broader policy debates. Democratic education involves active public participation and influence. It's about the community shaping its own educational future.
Okay. And the fourth point, I have a feeling this is the one most people jump to when they hear democratizing education.
It often is, yeah. The fourth point is providing free, equal, and widespread access to quality education for all members of the community. Access. And the paper notes that when proponents talk about AI democratizing education, they're usually focusing mostly on this aspect.
Right.
Using AI to expand access to high-quality learning experiences, maybe through personalized instruction that's cheap and widely available.
Like using an AI tutor to give the kind of one-on-one help that, used to require a wealthy family, scaling it up so everything can potentially get that benefit.
Yeah.
Does that connect to the idea based on Bloom's 2 sigma problem?
Yes, exactly. For anyone listening who might not know, the 2 sigma problem refers to research back in the 80s that showed one-on-one human tutoring could boost student performance dramatically by about 2 standard deviations, 2 sigmas compared to a standard classroom.
Huge difference.
Massive. But the challenge was, how do you scale that? It's expensive, requires lots of tutors. AI has often been presented as the tech solution to finally achieve that widespread, personalized effectiveness. You've seen companies like Duolingo, Khan Academy, universities, the media. They often highlight this potential for personalization, inclusion, helping more students reach mastery. And they frame that as democratization.
Okay, so we have Dewey's 4 interconnected ideas. Prep for democratic living, democratic practices in school, democratic governance, and equal access.
Right.
And the paper really stresses these are linked. You can't just pick one, like access, and say you've achieved democratic education.
That's a crucial point it makes. They're complementary.
Yeah.
Just having equal access within a system that, say, stifles student voice or ignores public input or only teaches facts about democracy without letting students practice it, well, that wouldn't meet Dewey's standard.
Got it. Okay, now let's flip to the other side. The characteristics of current educational AI, especially those intelligent tutoring systems, the ITS, the paper spends a lot of time on them.
Yes, it presents ITS as sort of the flagship example of commercial educational AI today, especially now with the boost from generative AI.
Right.
They're designed to mimic a human tutor, guiding students, suggesting content, helping solve problems, interacting conversationally, that kind of thing.
And the promise is huge. Scale up high quality, personalized tutoring for everyone, tackle inequality in access, maybe boost learning outcomes significantly.
That's the pitch. And the paper zooms in on 3 key characteristics of this dominant ITS model that it sees as, well, particularly relevant to the democracy question.
Okay, what are they?
Individualization, a strong focus on mastery and automation.
Individualization. I mean, that sounds like a universally good thing, doesn't it? Tailoring learning just for you, at your pace.
It's certainly presented that way, and commercial EDAI largely frames learning as mainly an individual thing. This isn't totally new. You can trace roots back to folks like B.F. Skinner and his teaching machines.
Right, the programmed instruction idea.
Yeah. The idea is that AI can finally deliver efficient one-on-one learning at scale. And group learning is almost seen as, like, a necessary but less efficient compromise because human tutors are scarce. The focus is really on optimizing the delivery of information and skills to the individual student, adapting to their specific pace and maybe interests.
So the emphasis is squarely on the individual learner's efficiency, maybe even seeing the group part as a kind of drag.
In some ways, yeah, which ties right into the second characteristic. A strong focus on mastery, but often defined quite narrowly.
Narrowly how?
In this paradigm, good education is often equated with efficiently acquiring predetermined information, showing you know it through tests or assessments and covering the curriculum.
Checking the boxes.
Checking the boxes.
Yeah.
And AI is seen as this powerful tool to optimize that process, help students learn more stuff faster, achieve mastery of specific skills.
Very focused on measurable outcomes, curriculum targets.
Yes. And things that are harder to measure, like character development or critical thinking in a social setting or learning how to collaborate effectively, those tend to get less emphasis, or maybe they're addressed kind of superficially within this model.
Okay. And the third characteristic, automation.
Automation of tasks teachers traditionally do. This is also part of a longer trend, but AI is heavily marketed as a way to automate the tedious or repetitive parts of a teacher's job.
Like what?
Oh, everything from grading essays, maybe generating lesson plans, managing parent communication.
The idea being to free teachers up, let them do the more valuable human stuff with students.
That's the stated goal, absolutely. However, the paper also notes that the capabilities of AI, especially generative AI, are sometimes presented in ways that hint at a potential, maybe even inevitable, replacement of human teachers for certain functions, if not completely.
Okay. So, the little recap. We have Dewey's rich, interconnected picture prep for democracy, practice democracy in school, democratic governance, and access. And then we have the main features of current commercial EDAI, individualization, mastery, focus, automation.
Right.
Now, let's get into where the paper argues these things clash. This is the core of the critique, isn't it?
It really is. This is where the critical analysis comes to the forefront. The paper argues that while current commercial AI can certainly improve access,
The fourth point.
and maybe even help with mastery of specific content in that narrow sense we talked about, it actively works against or just plain fails to cultivate the other crucial aspects of democratic education that Dewey emphasized.
Okay, let's take the mastery focus first. The paper suggests AI's focus on mastery isn't democratic. That feels a bit counterintuitive. Don't you need to master stuff to be a good citizen?
Of course, knowledge is important, but from a Deweyan viewpoint, democratic education isn't just about efficiently transmitting facts for individual mastery. It's fundamentally about the process of learning itself, which involves students actively trying out roles, testing ideas through experience, engaging in practice-based learning within a social context, just getting information fed to you from a screen, or practicing skills solo on an AI tutor. While it might be efficient for learning facts, it's just not the same as getting experience in the messy, collaborative process of democratic living.
So it's that difference between learning about democracy versus actually doing democratic practices is part of how you learn.
Exactly. The paper states research showing that practical, discussion-based methods, think collaborative group projects, debates, classroom decision-making, are way more effective at fostering those democratic competencies Dewey valued than just individualized instruction, even if it's hyper-personalized.
Interesting.
Current ITS, because they're designed to efficiently guide individuals down these predetermined paths to hit measurable outcomes, are seen as much less flexible. They're less conducive to student-driven participatory learning, where students actually have some agency in shaping their own educational path.
So the personalization an ITS offers might tweak the speed of delivery or the examples it uses, but it doesn't usually let students co-decide the learning goals or question the curriculum itself, or challenge the basic power dynamic where the AI is the one holding all the knowledge.
Precisely. The AI typically acts as the epistemic authority.
The source of truth.
The source of truth, yeah. It holds the ultimate knowledge in that interaction. So learning becomes this vertical thing from AI down to student rather than a horizontal participatory process where students bring their own knowledge, question things, learn from each other.
Right.
Interacting with an AI just isn't the same as grappling with the complex, sometimes unpredictable dynamics of talking things through with real humans. Humans who have unique experiences, diverse backgrounds, maybe conflicting ideas.
Dealing with a peer who genuinely disagrees with you or challenges your thinking? That's a totally different ballgame than interacting with an AI that's programmed to be, patient and agreeable, or at least follow a specific script.
Absolutely. And those challenging human interactions, those are where students develop crucial skills for intersubjective deliberation and collaboration, skills you absolutely need to navigate a diverse democracy.
Okay.
Now, the paper isn't saying AI is useless. It's critical of this specific dominant model. It even suggests ways AI could be used differently.
Like how?
Like maybe using algorithms to analyze group discussions and prompt deeper debate, or using data to help groups reflect on how well they're collaborating. AI could potentially facilitate group work, not just replace it with individual tutoring.
That's fascinating, flipping the focus from optimizing the individual to optimizing the group's interaction. Okay, so individual mastery focus clashes with the experiential participatory learning Dewey valued. What about the emphasis on individualization itself?
Well, this clashes pretty head-on with Dewey's view of democracy as being fundamentally centered on communication, community cooperation.
Right, the associated living idea.
Exactly. While individualized IDAs might be efficient for transmitting info, they inherently cut down on meaningful interaction with peers. Dewey believed schools should be places where kids develop sophisticated communication skills and get experience seeing problems from an intersubjective perspective, basically, trying to understand things from different people's viewpoints and tackling shared issues cooperatively.
Which requires actually being in a shared space, actively engaging with others who are different from you.
Exactly. Learning, in this view, is deeply social. Students learn tons from just observing peers, participating in group activities, building knowledge together. The paper points out that while personalized AI tutors might make learning feel more engaging for the individual student, they just don't replicate the experience of navigating real human differences, different ways of thinking, different social backgrounds, different life experiences.
And those differences are what democracy is made of.
They're the very fabric of a democratic society. Learning how to interact across those differences is vital preparation.
Okay, that makes a strong case against purely individualized AI if the goal is democratic preparation. What about automation? How does automating teacher tasks become a problem from this perspective?
The paper argues that while the goal is often framed positively, freeing up teachers, automating tasks can actually erode really valuable points of human interaction and mentorship.
Can you give an example?
Sure, think about something seemingly simple like taking attendance. If you replace that brief human interaction with, say, facial recognition software, which some systems propose, you lose a small but potentially meaningful opportunity for a teacher to just check in on a student, notice if something seems off, or just make a quick human connection.
So even mundane tasks can be chances for connection, for care, for seeing students as whole people, not just data points learning content.
Right, and teachers are so much more than just information transmitters or paper graders. They're role models of engaged citizenship.
How so?
Well, how they engage with knowledge themselves, how they facilitate discussions, how they connect what's being learned to students' lives and the wider world. These are powerful, everyday examples of active democratic engagement in action, automating significant chunks of their role, especially parts that require complex human judgment, empathy, relationship building, that can really negatively impact their ability to foster those crucial human connections and the mentorship that's so necessary for democratic education.
It sounds like the paper isn't saying automation is always bad, but the types of tasks being automated and how it's done matter hugely.
That's it, exactly.
It seems to advocate for AI tools that augment teachers, maybe give them better insights into student needs, or help facilitate complex activities rather than tools that aim to replace the relational and judgmental parts of their job.
Precisely. Using AI to give teachers data that helps them understand student challenges better, maybe offering tools to help them scaffold complex learning activities, that's very different from automating instruction or interpersonal tasks wholesale.
Okay. Finally, let's touch on the privatization aspect. The paper talks about how the growing influence of private tech companies developing this commercial AI poses a challenge to democratic education.
Yeah, this ties directly back to that democratic governance aspect we talked about earlier.
Right, the third point from Dewey.
A Deweyan perspective really emphasizes public participation and influence over the aims and methods of education. But when powerful, often multinational, private corporations become the main providers of the core technology and platforms used in schools.
They gain a lot of power.
Significant power, yes. They can subtly, or maybe not so subtly, shape curriculum decisions through the tools they offer. They can influence teaching practices. And of course, they collect vast amounts of sensitive student data.
Data that the public, parents, maybe even educators themselves might have very little visibility into or control over how it's used or protected.
Exactly. The paper argues this erodes the public's capacity to make truly democratic decisions about their own educational system. These private companies, they're accountable primarily to their shareholders, to market pressures.
Which isn't the same as accountability to the public.
Very different from accountability to democratically elected officials or local school boards. Their interests aren't necessarily aligned with the public good as determined through democratic processes.
And trying to regulate this can be tough, right? Keeping up with the tech, dealing with lobbying. Plus, the AI tools themselves are often like black boxes.
Yes, the opaque nature of how the algorithms work, the data they train on it, makes it really hard for educators, students, parents to fully understand or critically assess their influence. This can lead to a kind of dependency, maybe vendor lock-in for schools, makes it hard to switch even if a tool turns out to be problematic or doesn't really align with their educational goals. The paper argues this isn't just a consumer choice issue. It's about private entities influencing the fundamental goals and methods of learning in ways that can bypass democratic accountability.
And the impact on students.
Spending your formative years in an educational environment that's increasingly shaped and controlled by private entities over which you and your community have little say. The paper sees that as actively detrimental to preparing students for engaged citizenship in a democracy.
It really drives home that point about democratic governance needing to happen at the local level within the school, not just national policy.
Absolutely.
And here, too, the paper doesn't just critique, right? It mentions alternatives, like maybe developing educational AI as public infrastructure.
Yes, exactly. Treating it more like a public good think libraries or roads rather than just a market commodity driven by profit.
Or at least having really robust public processes.
At a minimum, ensuring stringent, transparent public procurement processes that meaningfully involve educators, parents, maybe even students, in defining what's needed and evaluating whether AI tools actually align with democratic values.
Okay, so to kind of pull this all together, this paper, using John Dewey's really deep framework for democratic education, it makes a compelling case that current commercial AI, especially that dominant ITS model, focusing on individualization, narrow mastery, automation, often controlled by private companies, it fundamentally runs counter to key aspects of truly democratic education.
It really highlights that while AI proponents focus so much on increasing access, which is just one piece of Dewey's puzzle, his vision demands much more. It demands preparing students for democratic living through direct experience and participation. It demands embedding democratic practices within the school itself. And it demands democratic governance of the whole educational system.
And the paper leaves us thinking that AI could potentially be used very differently to empower teachers, facilitate rich group interactions, enable hands-on learning through simulations, maybe developed as public resources, paths that seem like they'd align much better with those broader democratic goals.
What's really striking, I think, is how the paper reveals that the dominant model of EDAI isn't just neutral tech. It embodies certain assumptions about what good education is.
Assumptions about efficiency.
Yeah, assumptions centered on efficiency, measurement, individual knowledge acquisition. These ideas aren't new in educational technology, but when you really scrutinize them through a rigorous framework like Dewey's critical pragmatism, well, they seem to fall short of the complex social participatory preparation needed for a healthy democratic society.
That definitely leaves us with a lot to consider. If democratic education is truly about equipping students to understand and shape their shared world together, what are the long-term consequences of creating learning environments increasingly mediated by these opaque, individualized tools? Tools that students, teachers, communities often have very little control over. It makes you ask, what responsibility do you listening have as someone invested in education and technology in our society? Responsibility to critically engage with this and maybe help shape the role technology plays and how the next generation learns not just facts, but how to actually live in and govern our shared world. Something to definitely mull over.